By my count, we are 95 days away from the election. Maybe? Who knows? Because the single most powerful person in the world tweeted earlier today, with universal mail-in voting, not absentee voting, which is good. It's the same thing, and he did it. 2020 will be the most inaccurate and fraudulent election in history. It will be a great embarrassment to the USA. And what a change it would be for the USA to be embarrassed by its government. Delay the election until people can properly, securely, and safely vote. So that was Donald Trump, president, doing what I guess was next up. It had to be this. He's looking out at the polls, and he's saying now maybe we delay. And look, I sort of make that connection, but a lot of people are. Rashida Tlaib tweeted right after him, the general election will take place on November 3rd, period. We aren't going to delay an election just because this impeached president's poll numbers are falling. Love Rashida Tlaib. But anyway, look, we've got some more on this, JR. The possibility of the election being postponed. Are you worried about it? Are you surprised by the tweet?
Well, the surprise is definitely not there. This kind of power grab is what he's been up to every other month. So everything increases slowly, or something gets floated. There's a trial balloon to make sure to see where Americans stand, where his base stands on certain issues, so that he can perpetuate that further. I mean, he went with the invasion of cities, starting with Portland, and then he floated going to other cities just to see what people would say. He even mentioned the hotspot cities that every conservative likes to throw out when they have no argument, to say Chicago. So it's a trigger word, Chicago. So he says that, and you see if that works. Let's demonize the Postal Service. Let's actually take the legs out from the Postal Service, just so my predictions can come true about the negative nature of the post office. Every step is trying to continue to consolidate this power and then subvert a democratic election. That's just the way, that's just the plan. And so after all these things have been working, frustration must be building. So now, let's just go with how about we just delay the election, and maybe delayed turns into just canceling altogether. Again, it sounds crazy, and months ago when people say it sounded crazy, they're like, you're crazy, you've got Trump derangement syndrome. The problem is, this Trump derangement syndrome lies directly with Trump. That's the problem. He has Trump derangement syndrome, which means he thinks he can do whatever he wants in this country.
Yeah, there are two acceptable forms of TDS. One is that he is himself deranged, and the other is that if you don't have a pretty strong reaction to what's been going on, what the hell is wrong with you, honestly? That's what it is. Having an issue with Donald Trump when he's invading cities, when he's allowing continued tens of thousands to die in this pandemic, presiding over an unnecessarily harsh economic hit that could have been limited if he'd taken the pandemic seriously, and now is talking about possibly delaying an election that is certainly going to be compromised in a number of different ways, even if it takes place on the day it's supposed to, necessitates a response. And so we will continue to provide it. Now, just to be clear, Mr. President, the president does not have the authority to move the date of a federal election. And Mr. Trump's other claim on Thursday that widespread mail-in voting would make the election inaccurate and fraudulent is also false. But let's dig a little bit more into the first. The date of the general election is set by federal law and has been fixed since 1845. So a bit of a tradition, I would say. It would take a change in federal law to move that date. That would mean legislation enacted by Congress, signed by the president, and subject to challenge in the courts. Now, of course, he would sign it, and the courts are largely on his side, but he still has to get it through Congress. And while I have very little faith in the Democrats and their control of the House, I have to assume they wouldn't do this, right? Come on. They couldn't.
Yeah. I mean, we've been
come on. Before. And by the way, the Constitution mandates that the new Congress must be sworn in on January 3rd, and that the new president's term must begin on January 20th. Those dates cannot be changed just by the passage of normal legislation. So the date of the election, that's law. The rest of it, when the change actually happens, that's the Constitution, which so many people in this country say that they love so much. We'll find out if that is actually the case. But anyway, that's what he's laying out. It's an election that he is trying to mess with in as many ways as possible. When it comes to mail-in voting, he is trying to limit that. When it comes to the ability of people to vote safely in the midst of a pandemic, he and his Republican goons have done as much as they can to make sure that the funding isn't there for states. It is an absolute disaster, but I just hope that this next level of disaster doesn't happen.
Yeah, is this transparent desperation attempt because he knows how badly he's doing and how badly this could turn out? Is this translating to the people that support him, to the people that like him because he's a strong man, who like him because he has this perceived power and he's got this high intellect in their opinion that he can do and see all. They don't see the sheer cowardice in this move. Mm-hmm. You see, like, have you looked up yet and looked at your leader and went, man, maybe he's not that strong. Maybe he's looking to subvert this entire system for his own personal gain because he's done nothing for me. When is that realization going to happen?
Yeah. Yeah, and by the way, the thing is, like, to some extent, I really hope that we don't look back and look at this video and say, look at John reading the law as if it matters, because it technically does matter. But it reminds me of a tweet, you know, in the early days of the crackdown in Portland, where Ken Klippenstein tweeted, begging the mods to stop Trump from declaring martial law. Like, at the end of the day, it is still a, will he respect any of this? Mm-hmm. They would have to change the law to change the date, and they would have to amend the Constitution to change the date that the switchover happens next year, if you go by ink on documents, effectively. Exactly. And the question is, will he do that? And if he doesn't do that, what will happen? Will the Republicans, you know, side with the Constitution? Will the Supreme Court rule against him? Will it matter if the Supreme Court rules against him? I tend to think that he will not be successful in that, but I understand people's fear if they think otherwise. Check out the Damage Report podcast each day, wherever you get your podcasts, whether Pocket Casts or Stitcher or iTunes. You can join me as I give you the news and stories you want, with a range of co-hosts and interview guests jumping in on the fun each day. Again, that's the Damage Report, wherever you get your podcasts. And if you get them at iTunes, don't forget to rate and review. Sometimes I'll read them live on the show.